What's up, Wargamers? Welcome back to World of Wargaming. Thank you so much for stopping by the channel to check out this quick and dirty painting tutorial. Today we're going to be taking a look at painting this group of peasant survivors for Rangers of Shadowdeep, which is my new current obsession. These are an assortment of Whiz Kids and Reaper Bones models that come pre-primed, so I've never painted a pre-primed model, so we'll see how that works. Now in these, I'm going to be using a ton of this stuff. This technical contrast medium from Citadel. I love it. It turns pretty much any paint you already have on the hobby desk into a contrast paint. Mix it in about 50-50, 60-40, and it works. It makes everything run and flow and pool and do what you want contrast to do with the paint you already have. So instead of buying a whole bunch of contrast paints, buy the big, couple jars of this stuff, and you're pretty well set. To start things off, I'm going to be using some Elf Green and Army Green and Rakarth Flesh for most of their clothes. I'm painting peasants, and when we paint peasantry, we want to remember that richly dyed clothes were expensive. So we want to keep most of the colors pretty muted. I'm going to be using the green for the trousers and then the Rakarth Flesh for the undyed fabrics. So the shirt... on the girl, her apron. Now the girl, I want her to be a little bit more high to do. So I'm going to use some slightly different colors on her than what I use on the other ones. That being said, I'm going to thin this paint down and go ahead and get this first layer on the models. So as I said, I want the girls' clothes to be a little bit more refined, a little bit more high class. So I'm going to be using this Talisar blue. And if you've never used contrast paints before, the goal is to just slop them on heavy, let them fall into all those cracks. I'm going to be trying my best to avoid the apron and the strap around the back of her dress. And base coat done. Going to be moving on to the Rakarth Flesh to finish out, or almost finish out these base coats so that we can slop some wash on these things. Again, we're going to put this on the shirts and the apron, the ties, she's also got kind of a collar around the top of her dress. We're going to put some on there too. We're going to mix it down with some more of that contrast medium because it just makes things go so smoothly. For this next step, which is going to involve mainly just the man and the boy, he's got some leather details, his cap, his apron, his shoes. The little boy is not wearing shoes, but he does have a belt right there. So we're going to paint that belt with some Mournfang brown. Now, I stop at the Mournfang, but if you wanted to take it further, you could give it a quick little highlight of some rat skin flesh. Can round out and give you a little bit more texture and contrast and pop on your leather details if you want to do it that way. Again, I'm not doing that for this, because I just don't need that. I'm going to be using this size brush as my go-to. For some things, I'll use a smaller brush. For some things, I may use a bigger brush. And instead of the contrast medium here, we're going to be using a little bit of Lamian medium because I just want it to flow a little bit easier. I don't necessarily want it to do a lot of pooling. I want it to stay where I put it. I just want it to go where I put it easier. With the leather bits done, last couple of details we want to hit before doing our first wash are the wood details, the handle of the cleaver, the bucket that the young man is carrying, also the metal on the cleaver. We're going to do the wood parts with the Doom Bull Brown. For the metal bit on the cleaver, I use the Army Painter gunmetal. But again, they're your models. Use whatever colors you have. Like, don't rush out and buy a whole bunch of paint because, oh my goodness, I have to use these colors. That is never, ever the case. With the exception of maybe if you're part of a very strict historical gaming group. Like, It doesn't have to be, this exact shade, hue, tone of a color. Use whatever you've got, and it'll be great. I promise you, because painted models, any paint job is better than no paint job. I'm also going to use a little bit, after rant done, sorry, but I'm also going to use a little bit of the Apron Sunset here on the handle of the bucket, because I want to go ahead and get some wash on that before moving on to the skin tones and those other bits. Time for everybody's maker of the dirt and the grunge, some good old Agrax Earthshade. We're going to take this and slop it over pretty much everything. I'm going to try my very best not to get it on the skin or inside the water bucket or anywhere else. But, if it happens, it happens. That is the beauty of paint, is that you can always paint over it. Okay, I lost a piece of footage here. I apologize for that. The hair on all the figures, I used Nazgrag, the dark yellow contrast paint. The skin tone is Barbarian Flesh from the Army Painter. Inside that bucket is Ethermatic Blue contrast. And the ground is the Agrellan Earth technical paint from Citadel. On the skin and the hair both, I used a... goodness gracious, what did I use? Oh, I used a Reikland Flesh Shade, which is kind of an orangey reddish. Yeah, I use it for most skin tones. Now, if you wanted to take these further, you could go back with that Rakarth and you can put some highlights on that, or you can come back with some Teclis Blue and put some highlights on the dress, or a brighter, like a Flash gets yellow through the hair for some brighter blonde highlights through the hair. However, for these models, that is unnecessary for me. They are painted to an acceptable, what is my tabletop standard, which is a wash and a base coat, basically. Very, very, very few highlights, if any at all. I'm not going to paint the eyes. I'm not going to paint, a 5 o'clock shadow on the grown man. I don't need that. That level of detail is great for heroes in an army, or if you're building the actual skirmish team, but these folks are just bystanders. And for me, that was something that was part of the hobby that took a long time to realize, is that not everything has to be painted to my exceptionally unrealistic standards. It's not. It's painted. It'll look great on the table, especially in comparison to my other, cool models, the models that I'm actually going to sink some time and effort and energy into. And plus, I don't want a bunch of peasants, detracting attention away from the heroes. Now, again, I've said this a few times. I'm going to say it probably a few more times, at least once. It doesn't matter if you use the exact same colors that I use. It's absolutely unnecessary. The big thing to remember, especially doing models like this, where it's bystanders or peasantry for a fantasy or low fantasy or historical kind of game, is that you want your colors to be dull and muted. You don't want to go with exceptionally, particularly bright colors, because that's just not what the peasantry would have worn. If you've hung out this long, I hope you've learned something, or at least not gotten sick of the sound of my voice. And either way, I'm incredibly grateful that you stopped by and hung out and listened to me talk about paint for a little while. If you haven't hit that like and subscribe button and that little notification bell yet, and you'd like to help support the channel, that's one really, really, really easy way to help me out. Now, if you'd like to support and dig a little bit deeper, and if you can't, that's fine. I don't hold it against you. I'm grateful just for you to stop by and watch. But if you'd like to support a little bit more, check down in the description. There's a link to my Patreon account, as well as the Instagram account that I use for the channel. Give me a follow on Instagram. Talk to me, give me some comments, give me some feedback, and most importantly, have a great day, and I hope that the dice gods are forever in your favor.